Well, now that the prices have finally settled on Avatar, which cards are actually worth picking up, and which ones are going to find their way into a variety of deck strategies. This is not going to be a complete list because I am not an expert, but I do still want to talk about it, so let's get right into things. How's it going? My name is Suris, and if you're new here, then if you want to make commander decks that dominate tables without dominating your wallet, then you should subscribe, and if you like what I'm doing here, then tell 3 friends what I am building over on this channel. I like to focus on making Magic the Gathering more affordable for you, so in lieu of that, let's see what came out in Avatar that's worth picking up. Now, a booster box of Avatar could run you about $149 right now, and that's with whatever discount Amazon's throwing out at the moment. By contrast, the 75 cards we're going to be going over today will cost you about $20 in order to get all of them. And I want to start off with some fun commanders before we get into anything else. So let's begin with Azula Cunning Usurper. For 15 cents, she's a 4/4 Dimir commander that can generate red mana. And note, that does not make her a Grixis commander. Any mana that is in reminder text does not count. Whenever she enters, you choose an opponent and they exile some stuff they control and stuff from their grave, and then you can cast spells from the cards that your opponents had to exile. You can run her as the commander of a Dimir Blink and Theft deck, and I think you're going to have a wonderful time utilizing her ability to just take all of the best resources from your opponents. Your opponents do get the ability to choose which cards they want to give you, so make sure to sculpt their field and boards appropriately so that they don't actually get a real choice. Combustion Man's a legendary creature that can do lots of damage to people or blow up permanents, and you give your opponents the ultimatum over which one they want to take. Professor Zay Anthropologist is a fun spell-slingy commander who also happens to be his own looter. Well, it's technically rummaging, but you understand that they are basically the same thing. Being able to discard cards and draw cards is always going to be good in any Reanimator style strategy, and it's perfect for sculpting hands in Spellslinger decks that really don't want to get clogged up on lands. I also think there's a pretty fun dragon deck to be built with Ran and Shaw, especially because you can get multiple copies of them out on the board that are non-legendary. They also have a form of super fire breathing, and if you have both dragons out, then you get exactly enough mana to activate that super fire breathing. Yubi the Moon Spirit is effectively an omniscience that you can do a lot of damage with. The Mechanist is going to go really well in Tameo and other clue-based decks. The Lion Turtle is one of my favorite kinds of commanders since he just taps for 1 mana of any color, and you know what? If I'm being honest, I think this is going to be the next deck that I build on the channel because a Simic commander that just taps for mana is perfect. We have not gotten that yet outside of like partner varieties, not at this mana value anyway, so I think we're going to have a fun time with this one. Suki Courageous Rescuer is a lord for a bunch of your other creatures, and she can spawn allies for the ally decks. Katara can also work really well with ally decks, and her waterbending ability is basically a Craterhoof behemoth. Sokka also spawns a ton of allies, and he can actually be the front for a deck that has Katara in it. But if you want to use allies for their abilities instead of using them for their raw numbers, then Katara the Fearless is probably the commander you're going to be going for. Iroh Grand Lotus is a fantastic commander for a Team or Storm deck, especially if you want to focus on instants and lessons. Firelord Zuko can definitely be a powerful commander in a Blink deck. Just imagine casting a card that blinks your entire board and bringing it all back and Zuko seeing all of those cards, and suddenly you have a board that is absolutely gigantic. If you're a Stacks player, then you're really going to like Zal the Moonslayer, but bear in mind, he is in fact going to bounce your deck all the way up to bracket 4 if you choose to build him, since he's basically Blood Moon from the command zone. Toph Hard-Headed Teacher can be a pretty decent earthbending commander, but you may want to run her in the 99 of the 3-color Toph deck instead. But being able to turn all of your ramp spells into earthbending spells is a pretty neat trick. Aang at the Crossroads is an absolutely nutty commander for any kind of blink strategy. He's in the best colors to blink. He gets all the mana so that you can cast the blink spells. And whenever you blink him, look at the top 5 cards of your library and then throw a creature onto the battlefield. And if you blink something that's not Aang, he gets to flip immediately into the Destined Savior, which will let you morph your strategy into an earthbending strategy, giving all of your land creatures vigilance. Run a Tatiova in this and you're gonna be super happy. If you like taking all the best cards from your opponent, then Ko the Face Stealer is going to be a wonderful leader for any kind of theft or tricky strategy, and Unagi of Kyoshi Island is a wonderful draw power card, even if it's in the 99, but most certainly if it's in the front of a mono blue control strategy. That does it for all the commanders that are about $1 and under that are really worthwhile in this set, but if I missed any, please let me know in the comment section below. That said, I'm going to run through the rest of the strategies that I see performing well from this set in alphabetical order, so let's see what we've got. If you are running ally strategies, Earth King's Lieutenant and Sun Warriors are going to give you a ton of extra oomph for those strategies. If you're an Aristocrats enjoyer like I am, Obsessive Pursuit actually has some pretty fun ideas built into it. It's a weaker version of a Phyrexian Arena, but it allows you to stack 1/1 counters on an attacking creature. So if we've got like an evasive commander like Belladros, being able to sacrifice a bunch of our stuff in order to give that Belladros a bunch of power, and then because it will give it lifelink, you then get a bunch of health that you can use to untap all of your lands. There's just all kinds of design space that Obsessive Pursuit could be thrown into. Sandbagger Scavengers is great for Elos Ilkor and other Orzhov style aristocrat decks. Anytime we have a reanimation spell that operates when it's sacrificed and also cares about other things being sacrificed, we're probably going to be super happy about that kind of card. And then we have Judy, one of many, which can surveil and create token copies of itself while also sacrificing other artifacts or creatures. So it's a surveil card that allows you to fill your grave up with powerful things. It's a sacrifice outlet, and it is a token producer. It's going to be very hard for me to argue against running this in decks like Savra. The only downside to this is it does cost a mana to use its ability, and if you've ever played Aristocrats, they tend to be very, very tight with mana management because they miss land drops a bunch, because Aristocrat decks tend to run low amounts of cards that grant them mana. But that's about the only downside I can see to this. Having a sack outlet that fills my grave and also generates tokens is absolutely nutty. But now let's talk about airbending or blink strategies. And Aang the Last Airbender, Airbending Lesson, and Airbending Ascension all give us the ability to airbend with extra text, and I'm going to be honest, I think airbending is a pretty nutty proposition in general. Blink strategies are already really powerful, and cards like Airbender Ascension that will get triggered off of you doing a blink strategy will just allow you to generate a ton of extra blinks, which gives you a lot of extra value. After all, there's nothing better than playing a Muldrifter, drawing 2, and then being able to blink it a bunch of times to draw an entire deck into your hands. But then we've got to talk about clones, and Ember Island Production is the latest in a series of clone cards that create non-legendary versions of creatures. This thing, along with Irenicus's Vile Duplication, are wonderful, and this card only costs 1 more mana than Irenicus's, but it costs like 1/10 the price. At 15 cents, being able to create non-legendary clones is absolutely nutty, and if you've never seen the power of a Simic deck that just happens to be able to clone things like AC or Bonnie Paul or Tatyova, then you have no idea how powerful this card can actually get. If you're a Counters Matters deck that runs things like Corpsejack Menace, then maybe Daily Agents will appeal to you. After all, those decks only really run into the problem of needing established boards and sometimes getting chump blocked, but Daily Agents gives you an alternate way to play those decks. Being able to create a bunch of 1/1 counters in a deck like that and then have cards like Renata give them a bunch of counters immediately causes Daily Agents to be a gigantic burn engine. Yes, it requires a lot of setup, and it's going to be more powerful in Earthbend decks because it has double synergies with those kinds of decks, but I think in any 1/1 counters decks, you can find a way to make this card incredibly powerful. Anytime we have a card that says each opponent loses X life because of some condition, there's some way to bust it open wide. And now for some generic draw spells. Abandon Attachments is a 2-mana card that lets us discard a card to draw 2. It is yet another instant card that allows us to get a ton of extra resources. I only wish it said as an additional cost, but since it does not, cloning this card will simply make us discard 1, draw 2 multiple times instead of drawing 2 multiple times on its own. Accumulate Wisdom is a lesson that allows us to sculpt our hand using the top 3 cards of our library. We usually get 1 or 2 of these every single time a set has any kind of spell slinging significance, and this is the one we happen to get for this set. Bitter Work allows us to draw cards repeatedly so long as we keep on attacking players with creatures with power 4 or greater, but notably, this will let us draw up to 3 cards because it says whenever you attack a player. Waterbending Scroll is probably one of the strongest draw engines I've ever seen, and I'm not even kidding. Being able to tap a card for effectively 0 mana, because you're going to have a lot of islands out, allows you to just draw an extra card every single turn, all for the cost of 2 mana. That is a ridiculous value to me. Waterbending Ascension is 2 mana less than your standard Coastal Piracy effect, and is just as powerful so long as we've gotten a handful of hits out early. I'm going to be honest, this is basically an auto-include in any of my blue combat decks now, because Coastal Piracy effects are some of my favorite ways to draw cards to begin with, and being able to get those effects for 2 mana instead of 4 is just gravy. Spirit Water Revival is also a decent draw card in its own right. It's a divination. Divinations are always okay, but if you happen to waterbend with it as well, then instead you get to draw a ton of cards, reset your graveyard into your library, and now you have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. For 62 cents, this card is just Seagate Restoration, which comparatively is about $40. If you're playing earthbending decks, then Rock Avalanche is going to give you a bunch of ways to earthbend, since you're going to get a creature that's earthbending based on all the forests you have, and it's got flashback. Avatar Destiny is a card that Enchantress decks are going to really love, being able to get 1/1 for every creature in your graveyard, so every failed Enchantress engine goes to the grave, and suddenly the Avatar Destiny is going to be huge, and like Audacity or Rancor before it, it replaces itself whenever it dies. If you're running Go Wides decks, then Air Nomad Legacy is going to give all your creatures with flying 1/1, and How to Start a Riot can give all of your creatures 2/0, while also letting something like a Commander gain Menace. Every set comes with a couple protection pieces, and this set is no different. Enter the Avastar State is a 1 mana card that can grant a bunch of keywords to a creature, but specifically it's going to give it hexproof, which is probably the most important of all of those keywords. And now the area that's getting fleshed out the most because of airbending decks, ramp cards. Cycle of Renewal is a roiling regrowth, but with the lesson text on it. Elemental Teachings allows us to yank 4 lands out of the deck, throw them to our opponents, and they get to select 2 of them to go to our board, 2 to go to the grave. Run this in decks like Taval, and you won't have to worry about losing any of those lands for any amount of time. Raucous Audience is a mana dork that can tap for 1 normally, but tap for 2 with bigger creatures on the board. It's a weaker version of Fanatic of Ronus, but it can be ran alongside it in the same decks. Unlucky Cabbage Merchant can go into food decks, allowing them to get a rampant growth anytime you sack a food, so long as you can keep the Cabbage Merchant out for longer than his effect normally forces him to dip away for. The Earth King makes a 4/4, and that 4/4 can then get you lands, and any 4/4s you have from, say, a Rampaging Baloth will also give you more lands. Shared Roots is a rampant growth, and having access to more rampant growths is always a good thing in my opinion. Great Divide Guide makes all your lands tap for any land type that you need, and also it itself is an ally, so he gets his own ability, being a 2-mana dork. Earthbender's Ascension says whenever it enters Earthbend 2, then search for a basic land card. This is going to be fantastic in Tatiova land hit decks, or just any Earthbend strategy on its own. But the most powerful ramp spell we saw in this entire set, in my opinion, is the Bender's Waterskin, a 3-mana mana rock that allows you to get a mana anytime any opponent has their own up-tap step. This means that if we are playing a blue or black control deck, the Bender's Waterskin will always give us the mana we need for those incredibly powerful instant spells on our opponent's turns. Combo this with a Victory Chimes, and suddenly you have a mini Seedborn Muse that you can just keep on fueling your cards through every player's turn. Running this in a Nimris deck will allow you to always have the mana you need to cast your instant spells on your opponent's turn, letting you dig through your deck at an absolutely bonkers pace. Reanimation decks always get a 5-mana Reanimate whenever a new set comes out, and Zuko's Conviction is one of the more convincing ones for me to actually put into a standard deck. So for 1 black mana, we can take any creature from our graveyard and put it in our hand, but if we kick it, making it a 5-mana card, then we get to reanimate that creature. But the most important part about this is it's an instant spell, so we can use this to get important game pieces that don't cost a lot for 1 mana, or we can spend 5 mana to reanimate a big boy on our opponent's turn. Imagine your opponent trying to swing out, and then you reanimate a Noxious Gearhulk, knocking out one of their powerful game pieces. It does bring the card into the battlefield tapped, but that doesn't really matter if we're getting out cards like Massacre Worm that have the ability to protect us from giant board states. Foggy Swamp Visions is one of the more interesting ones in this area for me, though, because Foggy Swamp Visions is, with the right setup, a second copy of Rise of the Dark Realms. It does have the clause where you lose all the creatures that you reanimate with it at the end of the turn because it makes token copies of them and not real versions of the creatures, but there's plenty of ways around that, like being able to end our turn forcibly, or just getting a board state that has a hasty creature that's able to win the game in its own right without having to worry about the turn ever actually ending. Speaking of generic strategies like Reanimation, we have removal, and every color except black got some pretty honest-to-God great removal at budget in here. Aang's Iceberg is your bog standard Oblivion Ring style card, but it has flash, so we can use this on our opponent's turns when we need it. Airbender's Reversal can blow up attacking creatures, but notably it can also airbend creatures, which is really, really powerful. Being able to recast your own powerful creatures that have great ETBs or great cast triggers like Eldrazi is absolutely nutty. Destined Confrontation is a board wipe that's not quite up to snuff with Wrath of God, but it does force players to sacrifice their cards. So, if a player is playing a Voltron deck where their commander is always going to be nice and big and burly and gets indestructible and hexproof, Destined Confrontation will dodge all of that, forcing them to sack the commander because they can't meet any of the requirements for confrontation. Honest Work is a power creep of cards that turn things into 1/1 citizens. Now, I know that we got one of these in Foundations, and that was great, but seeing that power creep so quickly is kind of frustrating. It's not been that long since throwing something into a 1/1 citizen for 1 mana was introduced to us in New Capenna. But this also removes any counters the card previously had, so there's plenty of strategies this just turns off. Origin of Metal Bending is a protection piece that can also blow up an artifact or enchantment. Honestly, this is going to be an auto-include in damn near any green deck as far as I'm concerned. Price of Freedom can blow up any artifact or land and allow us to draw a card. Anytime that kind of ability is attached to a cantrip, it's going to be pretty powerful. And Boomerang Basics is, well, a boomerang, but if we throw it on our own cards, we get to draw a card. For 1 mana, that's not bad, being able to take Voltron commanders and toss them back into their owner's hands, or being able to reuse our powerful ETBs. Honestly, its only sin is being a sorcery. Honestly, one of the more interesting cards in this set in the removal section is Zuko's Exile. For 5 mana, you get the ability to exile an artifact, creature, or enchantment, which does not seem like a ton until you realize that this basically patches up a hole in every single bit of the color pie. Green struggles with exiling cards, even though it can get rid of creatures, artifacts, or enchantments very well. This patches up that hole in green. Red struggles with getting rid of enchantments. This patches up that hole in red. Black suffers with being able to get rid of artifacts, and this allows black to get rid of artifacts. Blue generally has narrow removal in the form of counterspells or only being able to affect 1 kind of permanent, and this gives it the ability to affect 3 kinds of permanent at its usual speed. The only color that does not benefit from Zuko's Exile is white, which already did all of these things very well at less mana. But if you're running a deck without white and you're struggling with any kind of permanent, then this card effectively patches up what your color, whatever it may be, tends to struggle with. But the most important one for me out of all of these is the Meteor Sword. This is a Meteor Golem in every way, shape, and form, and that is one of my favorite cards in Magic the Gathering. It's an equipment that can blow up any permanent, and it gives a creature 3/3. It has the stat line of the Meteor Golem and the cost of the Meteor Golem. Its only sin is being a non-creature in its own right, so it's hard to reanimate or blink. So as much as I love the card, and I'm really appreciative of the flavor, giving us an avatar card that is 100% a reference to a Magic the Gathering card that everybody knows about, I also think that not having creature in its type is going to limit its usability, but I could be wrong, as it is an equipment, and that does give it a lot of extra flexibility that I might not be considering. But on to a type of deck that got an absolutely gigantic power boost from Avatar: Shrines. For less than $1, you can get the 5 differently colored shrines for Avatar, and the Northern Air Temple, Southern Air Temple, Kyoshi Island Plaza, Crescent Island Temple, and Spirit Oasis are all far more powerful than the previous shrines we've seen in the game, because they not only do their abilities late into the game as you play shrines, but they also give you their ability instantly when they come out. When you're playing a Shrines commander, it's easy to get 2 to 10 shrines out very quickly. So Spirit Oasis becomes a 3-mana draw 10. Northern Air Temple becomes a 1-mana everybody burns for 10. Kyoshi Plaza becomes a 3-mana ramp for 10. And I'm not gonna lie, Crescent Island Temple creating a bunch of prowess monks and then using the mana from Kyoshi's Plaza to cast a shit ton of non-creature spells, which also happen to be shrines, feels like cheating. Being able to make those prowess monks punch somebody for damn near most of their life and then doming them in the end with the Northern Air Temple just makes me feel tingly inside in a way that I'm sure certain people in the Weimar Republic felt shortly before they lost the war. It feels like you're doing a horrible thing, and you've constantly been doing a horrible thing, but you know that damn near nothing is going to stop other people from stopping you because you've just kept doing it. Then we have the Southern Air Temple, which when it enters, it puts X/1/1 counters on not one, but every creature we control. So you get those Island Temple cards, and then you give them all 1/1 counters with the Air Temple, and they get the prowess ability. Like, these are the strongest shrines we've ever seen created, bar none. If you're playing a Storm deck at a very low power level, then Dragonfly Swarm is a fantastic way to get yourself a payoff even when you've been stopped. And if you're playing at a higher power level, then Last Agni Kai is a wonderful removal spell that also doubles as a free ritual. If you're playing any deck that cares about untap abilities, then Cat Owl is going to do you a wonderful favor and untap your artifacts or creatures whenever it attacks. And North Pole Patrol gives us a way to untap any permanent we control for 3 mana and repeat that anytime we want because it is a tap ability. This is just a Kiora's follower in mono blue, and it's even got a waterbend ability that will sometimes have niche situations like being able to turn off Voltron commanders before they hit you in the face with Vigilance. Finally, the budget lands at around $1 or less that are in here that are great are Secret Tunnel, with its ability to get not 1, but 2 creatures to be unblockable. Jasmine Dragon Tea-Shop will be fantastic for allied decks, and it'll even have some niche applications in Aristocrat decks, being able to create tokens late into the game when everybody is starting to run out of steam. Agnaquella allows you to draw and discard, which is something we normally see on multicolored utility lands. White Lotus Hideout allows you to add 1 mana of any color, but the most important part about this for me is the fact that if you're either playing a Lesson deck or a Shrine deck, this is just an Omni land for those decks that comes into play untapped. Rumble Arena is the usual card that comes down and scries you for 1. We've seen like 8 or 9 of these lands. They're usually not looked at very favorably with the community, but I'm going to be honest, I love these cards in monocolored decks. You don't need that many basic lands when you're playing mono black or mono green, and having a bunch of lands in your deck just come into play untapped and scry you just lets you get powerful cards to the top of your deck really frequently. Finally, there's Realm of Ko, which can generate 1/1 spirit tokens for any Aristocrat deck. And because that spirit can't be blocked by non-spirits, there are some niche combat applications to those cards as well. But with all that said, that's every card at $1 or under that I found in the Avatar set that I think is worth picking up. There's obviously going to be fluctuations in the prices of these cards as time goes on, and there's also the added bonus of me potentially skipping over cards that maybe you see as incredibly powerful. If there's any under $1 cards that I missed, let me know in the comment section below. I would love to hear y'all's feedback on this. That said, if you like what I'm doing over here, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you haven't already, please check out the channel sponsor, Mana Pool. If you want to pick up any of the cards I mentioned, then Mana Pool has all of your singles available to you. There's a link in the description that will support my channel and what I do. And if you want to get $5 off of your purchase, if you've never used Mana Pool before, my link in the description will give you $5 off of your first mana pool purchase if you are a new account. That all said, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you being here. And if you like what I do, like I said, there are various ways to support my channel and what I'm doing here. But with that said, hopefully I will see y'all in the next one. I've made the unfortunate mistake of making all fan art canon, and you guys use that to make a ton of doppelgangers of me that try to ruin my life. So why not go ahead and celebrate that cacophony by picking up the new channel playmat over on 4th Wall. When you pick up the playmat, take a picture and throw it up on social media tagging me so I can feature you in a future video. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the video.